on these alternative technologies, we can continue learning.
Isang public service announcement mula sa PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
RPN Radio Philippines Network, Radyo Ronda, DZBS Baguio, member kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Ayasak Di Kabenguetan.
Programa abinukel iti Department of Education, Division of Benguet, tapno agtultuloy nga maipaayan ti adal, dagiti patpatgen ken dungdungwen tayo nga anak, nga agbasbasa, uray ita agdama a pandemya. Na isang sangayan na programa iti radyo, nga pakaitampukan iti napateg nga ad-adal. Ad-adal nga mainaig iti panagbasa ti anak tayo, ama ibinsa-binsa, babaen iti panangipalpalawag, dagiti nasisirib ken nasasariri nga manursuro. Isuda, dagiti mamaestra ken mamaestro tayo, iti DEP-ED Benguet, nga inkay makadkadwa iti tangatang. Isagsagot kada kayo iti Department of Education, Division of Benguet, ken daytoy nga istasyon.
Ayasak
Di Kabenguetan.
Good afternoon, science enthusiasts. This is your school on the air. I am Mrs. Loida Buslay, your teacher for today's session. I do hope that you are at your best condition and are eager to listen to what I will be discussing on air. In today's session, we'll focus on two of our important body systems, the respiratory and circulatory systems. After this session, you are expected to master the desired learning competency and achieve the following learning objectives. 1. Identify the parts of the human respiratory system and each part's function. 2. Describe how the movement of the diaphragm helps the air go in and out of the lungs. 3. Identify the major parts of the human circulatory system and each part's function. 4. Relate your heartbeat with the type of activities done. 5. Explain the mechanism on how the respiratory and circulatory systems work together to transport nutrients, gas, and other molecules to and from the different parts of the body. So learners, parents, and other learning facilitators, are you ready? Before we start, may I request the parents or guardians to make sure that your child or ward is in a comfortable and conducive place to learn and listen. Make sure that you have with you modules 1 and 2. Please monitor and guide your child or ward as they listen. Figure 4 on page 8 of your module presents the functional zones of the human respiratory system. These are the conducting and respiratory zones. The conducting zone consists of passageways or channels for air to move in and out of the lungs. It consists of the nose, where air enters and exits the body. It consists of the nose, where air enters and exits the body. Inside the nose are the cilia, which are the tiny hairs that initially purify air by trapping dusts and dirt. Next is the pharynx, which is a common passageway of food and air. It is followed by the larynx, or also called as the voice box or Adam's apple, where sound is also produced. Then, the cartilaginous trachea, which channels air towards the left and the right bronchi. These bronchi further subdivide into smaller tubes called bronchioles. The respiratory zone allows gas exchange. This process happens in the alveoli, which are sac-like structures wherein oxygen enters and gaseous waste product known as carbon dioxide is released. So in short, air enters the nose, then passes through the pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles, and then it reaches the alveoli. But why do we need to take in air? Well, we need oxygen for our body to harness or get energy from the nutrients absorbed by the digestive system from the food we eat. What happens when we inhale or exhale? Inhale, the diaphragm muscle contracts and it moves down and expands the chest cavity. Simultaneously, the ribs move up and increase the size of the chest cavity. There is now more space and less air pressure inside the lungs. Air pushes in from the outside where there is higher air pressure. It pushes into the lungs where there is lower air pressure. When we breathe out or exhale, the diaphragm muscle relaxes. The diaphragm and ribs return to their original place. The chest cavity returns to its original size. There is now less space and greater air pressure inside the lungs. It pushes the air outside where there is lower air pressure. This alternate contraction and relaxation of the diaphragm and the movement of the chest then results to changes in air pressure in and outside the body. Thus, air enters and exits the lungs. So, that's it for Module 1. More concepts will be learned as we move on to Module 2. Let us first have a very short break. Welcome back, and this time have Module 2, the Human Circulatory System review. In the What is it section, which is found on page 5, the three major parts of the human circulatory system is presented. These are the heart, which pumps blood, the blood vessels, which carries blood, and the blood, which carries materials such as oxygen throughout the body. Our heart is a four-chambered, muscular, double-pump organ. The septum separates it into left and right sides. It has valves too, which prevents backflow of blood. A more detailed structure of the human heart is found on page 6. There are three types of blood vessels. These are the arteries, which carry oxygenated blood away from the heart, the veins, which carry the oxygenated blood towards the heart, and the capillaries, the smallest blood vessels, which carries oxygen and nutrients to body tissues. The blood is made up of cell types. These are the red blood cells, which mainly function for oxygen transport, the white blood cells for body's defense, and the platelets, which function for blood clotting mechanism. Blood circulation can be pulmonary, coronary, or systemic. Coronary circulation moves blood through the tissues of the heart only. Systemic circulation moves blood from the heart to the rest of the body, excluding the lungs. Meanwhile, pulmonary circulation involves the movement of blood from the heart to the lungs, then back to the heart. Have you noticed your heartbeat after you did a lot of work or activities? Well, our heart beats faster when we do strenuous activities. This can be proven after you do activity 3 in the What's More section. So, how can we now describe how the circulatory system and respiratory system work together? After going through modules 1 and 2, we can now say that the respiratory system is responsible in taking in oxygen and the circulatory system transported throughout the body. This only shows that the body system cannot work alone. It needs the help of other body systems. In here, we can learn how the value of cooperation and unity lead to a functional and a healthy community. So as you go through the other parts of your modules, work together with your parents or guardians, contact your teachers for some queries and clarifications, and stay away from distractions. By doing this, you can answer all the items in the post-assessment correctly. And if that happens, congratulations for an excellent work. However, if you fail to do so, you can still review the lesson presentations and activities provided in your modules. So this ends our first session on air. Thank you for listening well. Goodbye and stay safe. Enjoy learning.
Ayasak
Di Kabenguetan.
Magandang umaga. Ako si Teacher Johnny Costian. Ang iyong module ay dinevelop ni Ginang Susana Alberto. Ang paksa natin ngayon ay tungkol sa mga sinaunang kabiasnang Asyano. Bibigyan pansin natin ang tungkol sa konsepto ng kabiasnan at mga elemento o katangian nito. Ang ating layunin sa araling ito ay nabibigyan kahulugan ang konsepto ng kabiasnan at nailalahad ang mga katangian nito. Kaya't inaasahan na pagkatapos ng araling ito ay nabibigyan kahulugan mo ang kabiasnan. Nasasabi ang pagkakaiba at pagkakatulad nito sa sibilisasyon at na isa-isa ang mga elemento o katangian nito. Handa ka na ba? Kung gayon, ihanda ang mga sumusunod upang may sagawa ang mga gawain sa module na ito. Sa iyong pagsagot at pagsasagawa ng mga gawain, ay maaari kang humingi ng gabay ng iyong mga magulang o kaya naman ay nakakatandang kapatid. Maaari mo ring tawagan o i-text ang iyong guro kung may mga gusto kang linawin pagkatapos mong mapanood ang video na ito. Ito lamang ay magsisilbing gabay sa iyong paggawa ng iyong mga gawain. Bago natin simulan, makikita mo sa iyong module sa bahaging subukin na may 15 katanungan na susubok sa iyong kaalaman tungkol sa bagong aralin. Sagutin mo ito sa sagutang papel ng may katapatan. Pag natapos mo ay iwasto ang iyong sagot at isang guni sa susing sagot na nasa huling pahina. Pinapaalalanan lamang kita na kahit nakakuha ka ng perfect score, ay mas mainam na ipagpatuloy mo pa rin ang pagsagot at pagsagawa ng mga gawain sa module na ito upang makapagdagdag sa iyong mga kaalaman at matututunan. Handa ka na bang makinig? Bago natin simulan, mayroon ka bang maaring iugnay sa salitang kabiasnan at sibilisasyon? Ano ba ang nararapat? Kabiasnan ba o sibilisasyon? Ano ba ang sibilisasyon? Ito ay mula sa salitang Latin na civitas, ibig sabihin ay lungsod. Inilalarawan bilang masalimot na pamumuhay sa lungsod, kaya't naakma lamang ito sa pamumuhay ng Sumer, Indus at Shang. Ano naman ang kabiasnan? Magaling. Ito ay likas na salitang Pilipino mula sa salitang ugat na bihasa. Ibig sabihin ay eksperto o magaling. Ito ay inilalarawan bilang pamumuhay na nakagawian at pinipino ng maraming pangkat ng tao, kasama rito ang wika, kaugalian, paniniwala at sining. Mayroon itong mas malawak na saklaw. Ang paninirahan sa lungsod at maging sa hindi lungsod ay kapwa kabiasnan. Ngayon, ibig bang sabihin na mas mataas ang sibilisasyon kaysa sa kabiasnan? O kaya naman ang kabiasnan ba ay mas mataas kaysa sa sibilisasyon? Hindi. Dahil ang mga ito ay naglalarawan sa pamumuhay at tumutugon lamang sa hamon at hinarap ng kapaligiran. Siguro ngayon ay nagtatanong ka, paano nga ba nabuo ang kabiasnan? Ano-ano sa iyong sariling pagsusuri at pag-unawa ang mga katangian na ito? Tama, hindi naging madali ang pagunlad at pagbubuo ng kabiasnan. Ngunit, ilan sa mga batayan o katangian nito ay ang pagkakaroon ng kaalaman sa agrikultura, edukasyon, teknolohiya at agham, sining, arkitektura at inhinyera, relihiyon at kultura. May sistema ng pamahalaan at ekonomiya, at meron ding sistema ng pagsusulat na sinusunod sa kanilang pangkat o lipunan. Ngayon, kunin mo ang iyong module at sagutin ang mga gawaing nayanda. Ito ay 3 hanggang 4 na araw mong gawain. Kung may bahaging hindi mo naintindihan, maaari mong ulitin ang video o kaya naman ay basahin ang iyong aklat sa kasaysayan ng Asya para sa karagdagang gawain. Inuulit ko, pwede kang magpatulong o humingi ng gabay mula sa iyong tatay, nanay, kuya, ate o kasama sa bahay. Nandito rin ako na nakaantabay kung mayroon kang katanungan. Pag natapos mong sagutin ang bawat gawain, ay wasto mo ang iyong sagot. Isang guni ito sa susing sagot na nasa huling pahina. Inaasahan ko na matatapos ang iyong module sa naibigay na takdang araw. Gawin ito ng may kagalakan sa iyong puso. Hanggang sa muli nating pagkikita para sa iyong susunod na module, paalam at salamat.
Ayasak
Di Kabenguetan.
Hello once again, we're back. I'm Chris Frijong and I will be assisting you as you learn your second module for today. It is expected that you have read the preliminaries and you already have answered what I know activity. If not, pause this video and do the task first before you proceed. Do not forget to check your answer once you're done. The answer keys are found at the end of the module. Now, to help us understand the lesson that we are to tackle today, let us try to recall your lessons in solving linear equations in one variable. Looking at this equation, what must be the number to be added to 3 so that we'll come up with 5 as an answer? 2. Very good. Now, The task that is assigned to you is to show the answer is 2 using algebraic methods. So instead of a box, we'll try to replace our box with a variable x so that we'll come up with the equation x plus 3 equals 5. Using algebraic methods, we group the constant together by transposing 3 to the other side. I hope you haven't forgotten our rule on transposing and the concept behind our transposing, which is the addition property of equality. To continue, we will now have the equation as x is equal to 5 minus 3. Since we transpose 3, we negate its sign becoming negative. And subtracting 3 from 5, we have an answer which is 2. You might want to check your answer by substituting the answer against the original equation. And it shows indeed that our answer is 2. You may pause again this video and accomplish what's in activity. Check it as well right after you're done. Are you done with what's in activity? Were you able to get the answers correctly? If not, did you try to recheck your solution and look into the steps where you got it wrong? I hope so, since the topic will play an important role in our discussion for today. Next is for what's new. You can just follow the instructions provided for you and answer the guide questions for you to have a glimpse of what we will be discussing in this module. If you're done, let's proceed. So how did you find what's new activity? Did you notice some interesting ideas on the topics that we are to learn in this module? I hope you have, and I hope that this video module will further enlighten those ideas that you have. Let's start by looking at the idea of the solution of a quadratic equation. Earlier, you have been presented the equation x squared equals 16, which has 2 possible solutions, which is 4 and negative 4. This shows that in a quadratic equation, there are 2 possible answers. We call this as solutions, roots, zeros of a quadratic equation. For this module, you will be learning 4 different methods on how to solve for those roots. Your module has more than enough examples for you to learn from. Though in this video, I will only be presenting 1 example each. So are you ready to learn how to solve for the roots of the quadratic equations? Let's check this out. Let's start with the first method, which is by extracting roots. To cut the discussion short, solving roots of quadratic equation by extracting roots is only possible when the linear term is 0, thus giving us the equation ax squared plus c equals 0. All we have to do is to transform this to the equation x squared equals c and use the properties incorporated in this method. These are the following properties. If c is greater than 0 or c is positive, we expect that the roots are the positive and negative square root of c. Second, if c is 0. If c is 0, then we are expecting 1 root only, and that will always be 0. Third, if c is less than 0 or c is negative, then we won't expect any real solutions of the equation. You will be learning concepts of complex numbers as you progress in your math lessons. However, in this module, you may say no solution exists for the equation if ever you encounter equations that leads to this property. Let's look at some examples on how to solve for the roots of quadratic equations using properties of extracting roots. Example number 1. X squared minus 25 equals 0. First, we will transform it to the form x squared equals c. To do that, we transpose negative 25 to the other side of the equation, giving us the equation x squared equals 25. Does this look like x squared equals c to you? Yes. So now we check the value of c. Is it positive? Is it 0? Or is it negative? Very good. It's positive. So we are going to use property number 1. Since we will use property number 1, then we will have x is equal to positive negative the square root of 25. And what's the square root of 25? Yes, it is 5. So we will have the answers or the roots to be x equals 5 or x is equal to negative 5. You may check our roots against our original equation if you need to, just like how it was presented in your module. Alright, we are now set. You are encouraged to go over examples presented in your module. Don't worry, each step in the solution is accompanied by an explanation. If you want, you can pause this video and accomplish Activity 1 and Assessment 1 before proceeding with the next method. The second method that we are going to learn is by factoring. Since the topic involves factoring, I hope you can still remember the factoring methods that you have learned when you were in your lower grade level. There are simple steps that were written in your module to help you solve for the roots of quadratic equations using factoring. We will try to follow those steps using examples that I will be presenting. Example number 1. We are to solve for the roots of the quadratic equation x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. The first step that we are going to do is to check if the equation is in standard form. Do you think our equation is in standard form? Yes. So since our equation is in standard form, then you may proceed. But if not, then you have to transform it to standard form before you proceed to the next step. Step 2. Factor the quadratic expression. In this step, your mastery on the different factoring techniques will play an important role. The factor of x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0 is the quantity x plus 3 times the quantity x plus 2 equals 0. If you're wondering how we factored the expression, you can check the video links provided in your module. Proceeding to step 3, we apply the zero product property. Zero product property states that if the product of two real numbers is 0, then either of the two is equal to 0 or both numbers are equal to 0. If that is the case, then we can both equate our factors to 0. Now, our equations will result to linear equations. So we have the equation x plus 3 equals 0 and x plus 2 equals 0. To simplify each equation, we isolate the constant to the other side by transposing the terms. So in our first equation, we have x plus 3 equals 0. We transpose 3 to the other side, which will give us an answer which is x equals negative 3. In the second equation, we have x plus 2 equals 0. Transposing 2 to the other side of the equation will give us x is equal to negative 2. Therefore, we can say that the roots are either negative 3 or negative 2. You can check if the roots are correct by substituting the roots against the original equation, just like how it was presented in your module. Method 3. So method 3 is by completing the square. We are going to use completing the square in solving for the roots of a quadratic equation. So let us try using completing the square in this equation. X squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 0. As always, make sure that the equation is in its standard form. Next is that we try to isolate the constant term on the right-hand side of the equation, thus having the equation x squared minus 2x equals 3. Next is for us to make the left-hand side of the equation a perfect square trinomial. So in finding the term that makes the quadratic expression a perfect square trinomial, we can just simply take the coefficient of the middle term divided by 2, then square the term. The result will be added to both sides of the equation. In this example, we have the middle term as negative 2. So we divide it by 2, then square the terms. Simplifying the term, negative 2 divided by 2 gives us negative 1. And the square of negative 1 is 1. So adding 1 to both sides of the equation gives us the equation x squared minus 2x plus 1 is equal to 3 plus 1. Now that the left-hand side of our equation is a perfect trinomial, we can write it as a square of a binomial. We simply take the root of the first term and write it as the first term of the binomial. We also take the root of the last term and it will be the second term of our binomial. Then we use the sign of the middle term as the operation of our binomial. So this will always be true if you follow the initial steps correctly. So now the resulting equation will be the quantity x minus 1 squared is equal to 4. We can now apply our method 1 in this part of the solution. Since 4 is positive, then we will use property number 1. We will now have the equation x minus 1 is equal to positive negative the square root of 4. Simplifying this equation further, we'll have two linear equations, which is x minus 1 is equal to the positive square root of 4, and the other one will be x minus 1 is equal to negative the square root of 4. Notice that we simply expanded this by separating our addition and subtraction operation. Simplifying x minus 1 is equal to positive the square root of 4 will give us x minus 1 is equal to 2, since the square root of 4 is 2. On the other equation, it will give us x minus 1 equals negative 2. Simplifying these equations further, we isolate the variable by transposing the constant to the other side of the equation. So the first equation will be x is equal to 2 plus 1. And the other equation will be x is equal to negative 2 plus 1. Simplifying these equations will give us x is equal to 3 and x is equal to negative 1. Therefore, the roots of the equation is either 3 or negative 1. The example that I showed has a equal to 1. The case is different when a is greater than 1. You may refer to your module for more examples. The fourth method that we are to learn today will be by quadratic formula. The derivation of this formula is presented in your module. What I will show you is how to use the formula in solving for the roots of the quadratic equation. There are steps written in your module for you to follow. Although I hope the examples that I will show you will help. Are you ready? So we have the equation x squared minus 7x plus 10 equals 0. First is to set the equation in standard form. Since the equation is already in standard form, we proceed with the next step. We identify the value of a, b, and c. So the value of our a is 1, the value of our b is negative 7, and the value of our c is 10. Using the quadratic formula, x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, we substitute the values of a, b, and c into the formula. So we have the equation x equals negative times the quantity negative 7 plus minus the square root of negative 7 square minus 4 times 1 times 10 all over 2 times 1. Simplifying this further, we will have 7 plus minus the square root of 49 minus 40 over 2. Then we get the difference of 49 and 40, which is 9. We now simplify the resulting linear equation, which are x is equal to 7 plus the square root of 9 over 2, and x is equal to 7 minus the square root of 9 over 2. Extracting the roots of 9, which is 3, then we will have x is equal to 7 plus 3 all over 2, and x equals 7 minus 3 all over 2. We perform the indicated operation on each linear equation. So we will have x is equal to 10 over 2, while the other one will be x is equal to 4 over 2. Finally, 10 divided by 2 will have a quotient of 5, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. Therefore, the roots of quadratic equation x squared minus 7x plus 10 is either 5 or 2. You can check our solution by substituting the roots against the original equation. Now it's your turn to do the activities. Each activity and assessment is intended for each method. The objective of the activities is for you to master the important steps in the different methods of solving roots of quadratic equations, while the assessments ask you to show the solution of the quadratic equations provided that the roots of the equation are already given. You can check your answer after you're done doing them. Remember, honesty is the best policy. You can always check back our discussion if you have to. Good luck, God bless, enjoy doing your task, and see you in the next video module. Bye!
Ayasak
Di Kabenguetan.
Greetings. I am Teacher Agustina Padinay, but you can call me Teacher Tina, and we are here for a new lesson. Hyperbola. You are familiar with this figure back then, right? And well, as you've noticed, we are literally surrounded by hyperbolas in our daily routines, like towers or models, lamps, flashlights, microphones, and many more. So what is there to know about this certain figure? Okay, let's get started, shall we? Okay, so let's define hyperbola. A hyperbola is a set of all points such that the difference of the distances between all points in the foci is constant. And of course, there are major concepts about it. First one, a hyperbola looks sort of like two mirrored parabolas with two halves in being called branches. Next one, like an ellipse, a hyperbola has two foci and two vertices. And the last one would be, unlike an ellipse, the foci in a hyperbola are further from the hyperbola's center than its vertices. And we have the note here for any point P that is on the hyperbola, D1 minus D2 is always the same. Okay, so we have here the vivid parts of the hyperbola for us to understand the definition and the concepts discussed a while ago. And of course, we would define these terminologies for you to know which is which and which will then be solved in the problems given to you. So, the first one would be the conjugate axis. It is the line passing through the center perpendicular to the transverse axis and has co-vertices and its endpoints. Next, vertex or vertices, on the other hand, are the points of intersection of the hyperbola with transverse axis on the points of the hyperbola with the transverse axis. Asymptote are the lines that pass through the center of the hyperbola and are asymptotic to the curves. Next, transverse axis is the line passing through the foci and has vertices as its endpoints. Focus is a fixed point. And the center is the midpoint of the segment connecting the foci. Also, defined as the point where the two asymptotes intersect, or it can be defined as the intersection of the transverse and the conjugate axis. There are also more terminologies which are relevant in knowing hyperbola and may also exist in other forms. Eccentricity is the ratio of the hyperbola. Focal length, the line segment joining the foci with the length 2c. Latera recta are the line segments passing through the foci and perpendicular to the transverse axis. Length of the latus rectum is 2b squared all over a. And lastly, directrix is the fixed line. Great! So break this ice. I prepared for a crossword wherein you have to find the terminologies we've discussed. There you have it. You should take a picture of it and see how you can answer it on your own, but you have to pause this video first before I could show you where the words are. Is that clear? Let's do it then. And the answers are Did you find all the words? Great! Let's go for the next ones then. Procedures on how to illustrate the two parts of the hyperbola. So there are two parts of hyperbola, the vertical and the horizontal axis. What is the difference of these two parts? Well, if x is squared, the hyperbola is vertical, that opens up and down. If y is squared, it is horizontal, that opens left or right. If a is positive, the hyperbola opens up or to the right. If it is negative, it opens down or to the left. With that in mind, we are going to discuss the procedure on vertical hyperbola. The center, a reference point, and always measures from the center. Transverse axis contains the vertices and the foci. It is similar to the major axis of an ellipse, but it is not necessarily the longest. At the end of the transverse axis, we have the vertices. The vertices are the endpoints of the transverse axis and are located on the hyperbola curve. The foci of hyperbola are located outside the vertices and in line with the vertices. We need the horizontal piece, which is the conjugate axis. The conjugate axis is perpendicular to the transverse axis. Once we have the transverse axis and the conjugate axis, we can already draw a rectangle around the center. Draw the asymptotes of the hyperbola by simply sketching and extending the diagonals of the central rectangle. There, learner, this is how the vertical parabola looks like. And it says here, the use of the center rectangle helps us draw the curve from the vertex, wraps around the focus, and approaches the asymptotes and never go inside the box. Let's go to the next one. So we have the horizontal hyperbola. Okay, so we have the procedure. Number 1, locate first the center of the hyperbola. Second one, draw the horizontal transverse axis passing through the center. 3, locate the vertices, which are the endpoints of the transverse axis. Label it as V1 and V2. Number 4, locate also the foci, which is outside the vertices and in line with the vertices. Label it as F1 and F2. Number 5, draw the conjugate axis, which is perpendicular to the transverse axis. Number 6, with the transverse and the conjugate axis, draw the rectangular box or the center rectangle. Number 7, the rectangular box or the center rectangle will guide you to draw the asymptotes. Then, finally, draw the hyperbola curve, which passes through the vertices, wraps around the foci, and follows the asymptotes that the curve, therefore, opens right and left. Feel proud of yourself, learner, since that was quite a lot, I admit. And so, we are going to end this lesson by first asking yourself this question. What are hyperbola? Are the concepts, properties, and characteristics enough for you to understand hyperbola? Let's leave that as your assignment. And then again, learner, if you have any queries regarding our topic, please do not hesitate to message me in our group chat. Okay, I hope you will be safe. God bless. and see you on our next class. Goodbye.
Ayasak
Di Kabenguetan.
Isang masayang araw sa inyo mga kabataang Ibenguet. Ngayon, lalo pa nating pagyayamanin ang araling natutunan sa paksang nakaraan.
Ito ang Eskwela DEP-ED, programang panradyo Araling Pilipino para sa Baitang 10. Ang inyong tagapaglingkod, Ginang Virginia Casimiro mula sa Tuba.
At ako naman si Ginang Minda Arisga, ang inyong lingkod mula pa rin sa Tuba. Mahilig ba kayong makinig o kaya magbasa ng mga kwento?
Ako, nung kabataan ko, yan ang pampatulog sa akin eh. Kapag di ako makatulog sa gabi, kinukwentuhan ako ng aking ina hanggang sa ako'y makatulog.
Ay, ang swerte mo sa nanay mo. Mahilig magkwento. Alam mo ba kung ano ang tawag sa kanila? Chismosa. Biro lang, partner. Sa katunayan, nais ko lamang sanang ipaalam sa mga tagapakinig na mayroon tayong bisita. Isa siyang guro. May nais daw siyang ipaunawa sa mga mag-aaral natin sa Benguet.
Sigurado akong matutuwa ang mga mag-aaral. Ilang buwan na rin di sila nakapakinig ng lecture mula sa kanilang mga guro.
Balita ko, ang ating bisitang guro ay kilala sa kagalingan niya sa pagkukwento. Kaya naman siya pinagigiliwan ng kanyang mga mag-aaral. Mayroon yata siyang baong magandang kwento para sa ating lahat.
Partner, huwag na nating patagalin ito. Magandang araw po sa inyo, Ginang Minda Arisga. Kami po'y nagagalak sa iyong pagparito. Alam po namin kayo handa nang kausapin ang ating mga tagapakinig, lalo na ang mga mag-aaral.
Magandang araw sa inyong lahat. Ako si Teacher Minda, ang inyong guro. Gaya ng nabanggit kanina, mayroon akong ipaparinig na magandang kwento sa inyo. Ngunit bago ang lahat, siguruhin mo nang nakahanda ang inyong mga papel at panulat upang inyong maitala ang mga mahahalagang detalye mula sa kwento na kaugnay ng ating nakaraang aralin tungkol sa mito. Ayos na ba tayo? Ang sabi nga ni Corina, handa na ba kayo? Narito na ang kwento na pinamagatang Ang Pag-uusisa ni Ambet.
Mama, pwede ba akong tulungan? Nag-aalala kasi ako kung wasto ang mga sinagot ko sa pagtataya ng aming unang module sa Filipino.
May ginagawa pa ako, anak. Ngunit sige, ano pa yung mga naaalala mong tanong doon? Pagtulungan nating sagutan habang inaayos ko ang sangkap ng iluluto kong pinikpikan. Ilapit mo dito.
Well, Nanang, heto na po. Ano ang tawag sa kwentong naglalahad ng kasaysayan ng mga Diyos-Diyosan noong unang panahon na sinasamba, dinarakila at pinipintakasi ng mga sinaunang tao?
Ah, yan lang ba? Ang sagot ay mito. Di ba binasa mo na yan sa inyong module?
Oo, Nana. Kaya lang, parang nakalimutan ko. Nais ko lamang manigurado. Ito. Ano ang kahalagahan ng mito ng sinaunang panahon?
Nakatutulong ito upang maunawaan ng mga sinaunang tao ang misteryo ng pagkalikha ng mundo, ng tao at ang katangian ng iba pang nilalang. Kaya naman, ang bawat kwento ng mito ay nauugnay sa kanilang kultura.
Ah, ganoon pala. Nabasa mo na ba ang mito na pinamagatang Cupid at Psyche? At saka, may isa pa, yung tungkol kay Bugan at Kinggawan?
Ay, yun ba? Napag-aralan namin yan nung ako ay nasa high school pa, sa asignaturang Panitikang Pandaigdig. Pero yung isa, mukhang yan ay hindi naman mula sa ibang bansa. Sa pagkakaalam ko, mito yan ng mga taga-Ifugao.
Ang galing mo naman, Nanang. Tama po kayo. Ang Cupid at Psyche ay mito nagmula sa bansang Rome. Ang Bugan at Kinggawan naman ay mitong Pilipino. Ito ay mito mula sa Ifugao, isa sa mga probinsya ng rehiyong Cordillera. Balik tayo sa Cupid at Psyche. Ano yung pinakamaling nagawa ni Psyche?
Nagkamali si Psyche nang nakinig siya sa panunulsol ng kanyang mga kapatid. Dahil sa kawalan ng tiwala, pinilit niyang silayan ang mukha ng asawa kahit hindi dapat. Nadiskubre niya na ang napangasawa ay hindi halimaw kundi si Cupido na Diyos ng pag-ibig. Dahil sa gulat ni Psyche, nabuhusan niya ng mainit na langis ang asawa. Dahil dito, nagtampo si Cupid at umuwi sa kanyang ina.
Tama rin sana pala ang sagot ko. Paano ba nagsimula ang pag-iibigan ni na Cupid at Psyche?
Kasi si Venus, ang ina ni Cupid at Diyosa ng kagandahan, ay nainggit dito kay Psyche. Pakiwari niya, mas maganda si Psyche kaysa sa kanya. Kaya inutusan niya si Cupid na paibigin si Psyche sa isang halimaw. Ngunit ang nangyari, si Cupid ang umibig kay Psyche.
Oo nga, yan nga ang nakalahad sa binasa kong module. Pero sa kwento ba, napatunayan ba ni Psyche na tunay ang pag-ibig niya kay Cupid? Kahit nagtampo siya at siya'y iniwan na ng kanyang asawang si Cupid?
Oo naman, sinundan niya ang asawa sa tahanan ng kanyang inang si Venus. Kahit tinato siya ng hindi maganda at binigyan ng mahihirap na pagsubok, ginawa lahat ni Psyche ang kanyang magagawa upang mapagtagumpayan ang mga ito.
Nanang, anong kultura ng mga taga-Rome ang makikita sa kanilang mito?
Ang paniniwala nila sa mga Diyos at Diyosa noong sinaunang panahon. Katulad din natin sila, ang ating mga ninuno rin ay may katulad sa paniniwala sa mga Diyos at Diyosa. Ito'y idinulot ng kakulangan pa ng agham o edukasyon na nagpapaliwanag sa pagkalikha o pagkakabuo ng mga bagay at ideya sa mundo. Kaya ang mga mito noong sinaunang panahon ay pinaniwala ang totoo. Katunayan, masasalamin ang kultura ng mga tao sa mito.
Salamat, Nanang. Pero, meron ding nabanggit sa aming module tungkol sa pandiwa. Ang mga pandiwa daw ay lalong nagpapalinaw sa paglalahad ng mga pangyayari sa isang kwentong gaya ng mito. Paano daw yung tatlong paraan ng paggamit ng pandiwa, Nanang?
Ang mga pandiwa ay ginagamit bilang aksyon, karanasan at pangyayari. May aksyon ang pandiwa kapag may aktor o tagaganap ng aksyon. Ginagamit din naman ang pandiwa bilang karanasan kung may nakararanas ng damdamin na inihuhudyat ng pandiwa at pangyayari kapag ang pandiwa ay siyang resulta ng isang pangyayari.
Wow! Tama lahat ang isinagot ko sa pagtataya kung ganoon. Salamat, Nanang!
O hayan, nagandaan ba kayo sa aking kwento? Hindi ba napakaganda? Mayroon ba kayong natutuhan mula sa kwentong napakinggan? Itala ang mga ito sa inyong kwaderno, sapagkat maaring ang mga detalye ay naitala sa nakaraang module ay maikaugnayan sa susunod nating aralin. Hanggang dito na lamang. Salamat sa pakikinig sa unang serye ng ating kwentuhan. Kita-kits na naman tayo sa ikalawang serye. Abangan nyo ha! Bago umalis ang ating bisita ay nais din natin siyang pasalamatan sa araling kaniyang hatid para sa mga anak natin sa Kabenguetan.
Oo nga partner, maraming salamat po Ma'am Arisga.
Kami man ay nagnanais na rin magpaalam upang bigyang daan ang susunod na programa. Maraming salamat sa inyong pagsubaybay sa ating programang
Eskwela at Kabenguetan, programang panradyo sa Pilipino, Baitang 10.
Ayasak Di Kabenguetan.
Programa binukel iti Department of Education, Division of Benguet, tapno agtultuloy nga maipaayan ti adal, dagiti patpatgen ken dungdungwen tayo nga anak, nga agbasbasa, uray ita agdama a pandemya. Na isang sangaya na programa iti radyo, nga pakaitampukan iti napateg nga ad-adal. Ad-adal nga mainaig iti panagbasa ti anak tayo, maibinsa-binsa, babaen iti panangipalpalawag, dagiti nasisirib ken nasasariri nga manursuro. Isuda, dagiti mamaestra ken mamaestro tayo, iti DEP-ED Benguet, nga inkay makadkadwa iti tangatang. Isagsagot kada kayo iti Department of Education, Division of Benguet, ken daytoy nga istasyon.
Ayasak
Di Kabenguetan.
RPN Radio Philippines Network, Radyo Ronda, DZBS Baguio, member kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.